Okay, Katie, are you there?
I am.
I'm still not seeing your picture though when you talk.
My video feed must not be coming up for some reason. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, just maybe go on the top. And there's buttons. I think you maybe you have to enable your camera.
Oh, where's that at?
It'll show us when we have viewers, and usually it starts about 5 minutes late because people always have trouble logging on. On the top, there are different options.
There we are. I think I got it now.
Okay. Yes. Yay. Okay, you're there. And I think we'll have.
We're live.
I should have actually do that. Here we go. Okay. There we go. We have 7 people on so far, so maybe. Hi, everyone. We're just having some. Born at 10. We'll wait. Maybe we just started a little late getting broadcast, so we're going to maybe hold on for just a minute because people are logging in right now, it looks like. Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm Katie Osborne, the ANST chair, and we're starting this internship interview and application tips today. And so I'm here with Dr. Laura Flashman, who's sitting with me. She's my internship supervisor, and she's agreed to help us today in getting some tips and doing some questions and answers. So we're lucky to have her here. And then as well, we have Katie Block, who's going to be joining us from Houston. So
hello. I don't know if y'all can see me, but hi.
There you go. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce both of our speakers who will be helping us field questions and answers. And then I'm going to be going over just some general tips and guidelines. And then Dr. Block will be giving some CV formatting and content guidelines and tips for about 15 minutes. And then we're going to be opening it up for questions. So for those of you who are new to Google Hangouts, as I somewhat am myself, all the screens look a little different, but there should be an icon somewhere on your screen that's a Q&A or question and answer. And while you're watching, if you want to go ahead and find that, then later after we get done with the rest of the talk, it's usually a blue kind of comment bubble, and you can click on that and it should open up on the side, and then you can type in a question and you can specify if you'd like that question to be available for Dr. Flashman or Dr. Block or both, and then we can go ahead and answer those during the call so you can have live feedback. We did have a few people who sent in questions ahead of time via email, so I'll have those available as well. I'd encourage you, if you're on the call, submit your questions through the Hangouts instead of through email, because I won't be able to check my email during the call. But so first of all, we're lucky to have Dr. Laura Flashman. She is a professor of psychiatry at Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth, where I'm here this year on internship. So I'm lucky to have my internship supervisor here helping us. She has been the director of neuropsychology at both Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center and New Hampshire Hospital up here in New Hampshire, where she supervises interns, and also there's an APS and postdoctoral fellowship here as well. So she has a lot of expertise and advice that she can share with us, and she's very approachable and nice, so not scary, so she'll be available to answer questions. Dr. Flashman's been quite helpful to ANTS before. She's done one of our ANTS directors meeting features, so you can get some more advice from her on our website there. And she's done some tips and training question and answers through some of our Society for Clinical Neuropsychology news feeds, newsletters as well. So will be here to answer advice. And then also Dr. Katie Block is the recently former ANST chair. Now she's chair of the Early Career Neuropsychology Committee through Society for Clinical Neuropsychology. So she's still here with ANST helping us out, and she is going to be going over CV formatting guidelines and answer any questions you have specifically about CVs, do's and don'ts, and will also be available for answering questions. Most of you know Dr. Block well, but she did her PhD in medical clinical psychology at University of Alabama, Birmingham. Then she trained with Drs. Russ Adams and Jim Scott at University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. And right now she's training with Dr. Corky Bowick at Tier Memorial Hermann. So she's trained with a lot of people who've had much expertise training, and she's been very active in Society for Clinical Neuropsychology and other professional organizations as well. So she's been around a lot of professional development circuits and can offer expertise as well. So I'm just going to start with some general tips. A lot of these actually came from Dr. Block through our APA trainings that we've done on interviewing tips. And so a lot of you had posted that you weren't able to attend that at APA. So for those of you who weren't able to travel, we're going to go over some of those really briefly. And Dr. Flashman and Dr. Block are both welcome to pipe in if they have any interjections or want to share anything in addition to what I'll be going over. But a lot of you on the call are applying for internship right now, so we're going to focus the majority of our time on application and interviewing kind of here and now stuff, but I wanted to briefly go over some advice and tips that Dr. Block had shared that I think was really helpful for those of you who might be joining who are earlier in your training. So if you're not applying this year, but you're wanting to get some advice for down the road, some keys that I think were really helpful that she had shared. The major one is just to be proactive and thoughtful and organized about how you approach graduate training. So not necessarily time to be organizing your essays and cover letters quite yet, but start setting goals right now of how you can just be a really strong graduate student, be actively involved in training and seek out educational professional development opportunities as much as possible. So another key that I think was super helpful was you can go on the APIC website now and look at other training programs that you might be interested in and look at their brochures in advance, not necessarily to be coming up with where exactly you want to apply for internship, but you want to get an idea early on in your training of what the sites are looking for applicants. So you want to know how many hours they want for contact hours, how much research productivity might be important to them, and so forth, so you can plan your training accordingly. You don't want to be applying to internship and have no idea how many hours make a competitive applicant, because at that point it's kind of too late. And so you want to be early on planning on what you can do to be a competitive applicant. Another great thing to be doing early on in your training is to just get data about what competitive interns look like, internship candidates look like. A great resource for that, there was an article that was published in 2000 by Mittenberg, and it's recently been updated. It's Ritchie et al. And anyone who's interested, I can email that, a citation for that on the listserv. But it's an article on selection criteria for neuropsych interns. And what they did is they pulled a lot of the internship programs that met selection criteria for neuropsych training. And they asked them what kind of practicum settings were important to them, how many hours, other applicant factors that made a difference in how their applicants were selected and who was deemed competitive kind of along the spectrum. And so reading that and getting an idea of what makes a selective applicant will help you just plan your time accordingly so you can set short and long-term goals for yourself to plan so you feel well prepared and confident at the time that you're actually applying for an internship. There's also a wealth of information on our ANST website. I had mentioned the ANST directors meeting that Dr. Flashman participated in. There are other internship training directors who've done that as well. And so you can look and they'll answer questions about their training program specifically. but they also answer questions in general, what makes a successful applicant, kind of do's and don'ts, different concerns that a lot of people have that they want to have answered. And so you can find information on the website, you can find resources for training programs, and then on the main Society for Clinical Neuropsychology program, there's databases of programs and other resources as well. So it's better to start early rather than later of just getting an idea of what kinds of resources are out there that might be helpful to you. So moving on, some real brief guidelines for application and interviews for those of you who are in the process right now of applying. I'm first going to go over some very broad guidelines for application and interview because a lot of you at this point will have more specific questions, and so you can guide those, or you can direct those to Dr. Flashman and Dr. Block afterwards, and they can answer any specific questions you have. But in general, looking at the applications, I'm going to go over some common pitfalls and just how to avoid them. One big one that seems obvious but cannot be reiterated enough is complete them early so you have plenty of time to proofread and proofread. So you don't want to spend the hours and hours it takes to put together a solid application and have, you know, an errant period or have the wrong site name or something little that's going to look really negative. And so just make sure that you're completing those early so you're not rushed trying to catch with those guidelines and not able to look over things enough times to make sure that you don't have little minor errors that might stand out. Looking at your personal statement, one thing that's really important is to find the right tone. So you don't want to be too stuffy, but you also don't want to be too personal. So it's really important to kind of find that middle ground where you're letting someone know more about you than they'd maybe get from your CV, but you're not oversharing to the point that they might have some concerns about your ability to be professional in a clinical setting. Along with that, you have 500 words per essay, so you want to use those words wisely. Don't say anything that's not necessary because this is really your chance to give them as much information as possible. So you want to look at the essays as a story that's going through. They're going to get your essays together, not separately. And so you don't want to be repeating information in one essay that you're talking about in another. So you want to look at it kind of as a progression of figure out what you want to talk about in your research essay, and then you don't need to necessarily reiterate that information in your personal statement or your diversity essay because they're going to be getting them all together. Similar to that, the essays really aren't the right place to be rehashing information that's in your CV. You're going to have both of those documents available to them. So if it's in your CV, it's kind of a waste of those precious words to be just repeating it. So you want to kind of look at it as a way to add, to clarify anything that you think might stand out, or to express something that just maybe isn't as apparent in your other documents. Another thing, as far as just setting the right tone, is to sell yourself, but with humility. And so you want to strike that balance of being able to showcase your strengths, if you're confident, and show really what sets you apart, but do that also with the context of looking like you're still eager to learn. So you're going to internship as a trainee, not a staff member. You're not expected to know everything. And training directors aren't going to want someone who already thinks they know everything because they're probably not going to be the most willing to learn and to use it as a year to continue to advance. And then I think there's probably a lot more specific stuff that we can go over as far as applications that you might want to add or that we can ask with questions.
Do you want to go over maybe some of the big do's and don'ts for each essay, since those are major components?
Sure. Would you? I think Dr. Block would like to add it. Do you want to jump in here and add a few? Dr. Block helped me. She read over my essays and gave me some great feedback and was really helpful in that. And so do you want to just kind of jump in and add some do's and don'ts that I didn't cover now?
Sure. Sure. So I think you can all hear me okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. So the personal essay, I think one of the most calls that I've seen in either helping or doing reviewing applications is that people, the way we all know how that story, and you got to.
Yeah, I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah.
I think we have some reception issues.
Uh-oh.
You're cutting out a little bit. I don't know if maybe you might want to move your laptop to another setting or something. Ooh, I don't know if you have reception issues or not, but I think trouble hearing you.
Possibly. Is this a little bit better?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay. So I think with the personal essay, people's initial
That's,
the most.
Is there a way to tell if other people are having? Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
No.
yeah, I'm going to come back. I think Dr. Block is having some issues.
Oops.
Oops. All right.
Okay, let's let Laura talk then.
Do you, well, Dr. Block's kind of figuring out her reception issues. Is there anything that you want to add in as far as the essays? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if there's anything that you wanted to.
No, I think the points that you raised were excellent. We do read them all at one time, so that you don't need to sort of say the same thing in each one. It's nice to get a flavor. A lot of them will have some of the rationale for why they've ended up being interested in this field. So they might talk about a family member or an experience they had with a friend who had cognitive problems or a traumatic brain injury or mental health issues. And that's sort of a nice way, I think, to sort of explain how you got interested without sharing way too much about, yourself. So that one is the one where I notice a lot. And again, I mean, I'll be honest, I look at that one and I look at the neuropsych and I look at the research. I don't care so much about your therapy experience, but that's just me. So it's probably equally important to look at all of them, but there's nothing that someone could say in a psychotherapy or, what your orientation is that would make me think that you were not an appropriate candidate. But I don't know that every training director does that.
I think that's an important consideration too, because in talking with other training directors, I have gotten the impression not just one person's going to get your application materials. So for example, like some VAs, you have more generalized experiences than others. Some university medical centers will vary. But for example, you're applying to site and you want to appeal to everyone because like I'm applying here and I may know that Dr. Flashman is really going to focus on one or two essays, whereas someone who might be supervising my psychotherapy might just be reading that essay and not so focused on my assessment experiences or vice versa. And so there's going to be a focus one versus the other, but then you're kind of getting all of them. So if something is important to someone, they're going to be able to pull it from your essay and you're not going to need to reiterate it across multiple essays.
I also appreciate that balance that Katie was talking about before between the experiences that you've already had and the experiences that you're hoping to get when you come to my site. And that's a place where the personalization is really nice because if you've read my brochure, you know what I offer. And I'm checking that sort of off in my mind as I read it in a generic letter. You might be talking about opportunities that we don't really offer at Dartmouth, and that's going to make me sort of less interested in thinking that we're a good fit for each other.
And I think that draws in perfectly to the next point when looking at cover letters. Cover letters cannot be underestimated as far as their importance in really selling fit. So it is so important to take the time to individualize your cover letters. That's a huge pitfall that people run into where it gets overwhelming. There's a lot of components to the application process. So it can be very tempting to develop this form cover letter where you talk about yourself and then just kind of highlight the name of the site and change it and send it to multiple sites. But the cover letter is really the place where you can sell your fit specifically to each site. So it's a way for you to demonstrate that you've done your homework. It's obvious if you read a cover letter whether someone's really invested the time to learn about the site or not. And that's also an area where you can sell your weaknesses as not weaknesses, but areas of further growth that site can specifically help address. So if there's an area that you feel like you wish you had more experience on your CV, or you're concerned that, oh, I haven't had very much rehab training, and that's going to really impact my ability to get a site with rehab training. Your cover letter is a great area where you can talk about, this area is a big interest of mine, and one thing that attracts me to your site is the ability to cross off XYZ criteria that I haven't had an opportunity at previous practicum sites. And so I think, again, just that idea that you're not expected to have had every training experience that you need in order to be a clinical neuropsychologist. And so not having certain things or being weaker in certain areas isn't necessarily a weakness if you sell it in a way that your site really offers something that I'm interested in that I haven't had as much experience for. And sites, I mean, they want to be helpful to you and they want to be part of your professional development. And so it's a good thing for a site to be able to offer something that you haven't had a lot of before. Another thing with cover letters, be mindful of formatting. Make sure that you're looking at the site's criteria. Some sites have specific formatting requirements or content inclusions that not every site has. And so just make sure that you double check. There's one site I remember I applied to that wanted a completely individualized cover letter. It's like they had their own worksheet and they wanted you really to fill it out as their cover letter. A couple of other sites wanted you to include interview preference dates, or they had certain tracks that they wanted you to list whether you were interested in it or not. Just be mindful of that because it's something that's easy to miss in their application materials and you don't want to look like you didn't do your homework ahead of time before applying. And then I don't have a lot to offer as far as letters of recommendation because I think that's something where if there's specific questions, you'll have some time that you can post those up for Dr. Block or specifically for Dr. Flashman because Dr. Flashman's got experience on both ends of the spectrum, being an internship and a postdoc and practicum trainer as well. So she's written and received a lot of letters of recommendation. So I figured I would just leave the time for her to address those questions. Moving on to interviews, the biggest advice, having just recently gone through this, that I can offer with interviews is go in with the right perspective. You will hear horror stories. People love to tell their horror stories. They love to just act like it's a war story thing. If you go into it with a mindset that it will be daunting and miserable, it will be daunting and miserable. It's fun if I know that sounds crazy, but it's fun if you go into it thinking this is going to be fun. But you get to travel to places you may not have traveled. You get to meet people who I've met, people who are friends now, who I'll probably have friends throughout my life. It's a small field. You see each other at conferences. You will throughout the rest of your careers. And so go into it with a mindset that it's exciting, it's something new and different, and it can be fun, and it will be, and that the mindset makes all the difference. Along with that, once you get an interview, you're qualified and competent. Sites look through a lot of applications, and if you are not a good fit for the site at all, or you're not a good enough applicant to be at that site, or for whatever reason you just don't stand a chance of being there, they're not going to offer you an interview. And so don't show up to an interview feeling insecure or like you have to overcompensate or you have to really prove yourself. You're qualified on paper, and the interview is a chance for you to demonstrate fit, that you're going to get along with the people there, that you're going to be easy to work with, that people will enjoy being around you for the year. So really breathe a sigh of relief when you get the interview and go into the actual interview with really looking at fit, whether you're a good fit for the site and vice versa, whether you like it there, and showing that you have a good personality and can get along with the people there. So you don't want to go into it thinking you really have to prove your qualifications because it can come off wrong, and it's not necessary at that point.
You know, I really want to reiterate that. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and there's been one person in all those 20 years out of everyone that we've interviewed that we chose not to rank. Everybody in my mind that comes would be a great candidate. And then what I'm looking for is for them to hear a little bit more about the program so that they can make an informed decision, and for just exactly what Katie said, for us to see that that would be a good fit, because it's, you know, it's a tight space. It's a lot of time that we spend together. We want to have somebody that we think is going to, you know, fit in with everybody and be able to benefit from the things that we have to offer.
And then as far as what the actual interviews look like, for me, that was a point of concern or just, I guess, anxiety. They vary a lot. So they're going to be different from site to site. Some of them are going to feel very formal and they're very structured and they have a definite plan of how your day is going to go. Others are very casual and flexible. People's personalities, kind of what the site is like, shows through a lot. So it's your chance to just be there and get a flavor. You'll get to interact with the people and see what it's like. They can be long days. They're not always long days. Some of them are 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. Some of them are just a morning. You want to plan your time so that you're not flying in and trying to get there right away, if at all possible. That being said, scheduling is difficult. And so go into it with that mindset that you're going to have some tight flights. You might be getting in late, etc. But try not to be flying in the morning of, if at all possible, or try to schedule. Some sites will offer an afternoon interview, but that's really, I found that to be less common. More often than not, it starts in the morning, so you have to really plan to be there the night before. Some of them are going to be individual interviews, but there are some panel interviews and some group interviews. And so you'll sometimes know in advance. Usually most sites, when they offer an interview, there will be a follow-up where a receptionist or another administrative person will send you a schedule and give you an idea of what the interview will be like. But they do vary a lot. One thing to keep in mind is the night before, try to relax, try to get in the right frame of mind. Most sites have an orientation, not all, but most sites have an orientation at the beginning of their interview where they're going to go over the tracks that they offer. They're going to go over the supervisors, and so they'll remind you. So if you've already done your homework when you're applying, you'll have some of that in your mind, and the sites will actually refresh you for the information in the morning. So you don't have to be cramming the night before excessively and staying up really late, remembering every detail of the site. One thing that is really helpful is bring a pad of paper with you and take some brief notes. One of the most important things to write down are names of people. You may know it, but you're nervous, and so you don't want to forget the names of people. One question that'll come up that people will ask you frequently is, who have you already talked to today, or what supervisors have you had a chance to talk with? And you don't want to just blank on their names and forget that, because it makes you potentially look uninterested when in fact it could just be nerves. So I found it really helpful to write down the names of people, the tracks they supervised, and sometimes I'd write their names down phonetically if it was a different spelling, just to make sure I was pronouncing it right. Other than that, it can be important to just have a little snack or water on you. They can be long days. Most of the time they'll provide lunch if it's a full day interview, but if you get hungry or nervous or whatever, it's just nice to have something on you to help with that. Dress is something that comes up a lot. I'm guessing we'll get questions on that. But in general, you want to stand out at interviews for reasons other than what you're wearing. You're not going to get ranked because you had the most, memorable jacket. And so think professional, black, gray, navy blue. People will sometimes say, we'll wear a navy blue or a gray suit because it's a little different than the black uniform that everyone wears. You can comment on that. I don't think that really dress matters so much for good. If you dress really inappropriately or something's too tight, too short, it's going to hurt you, but I don't think dress can really help you. More is just it's neutral or can hurt you.
I agree.
So as far as tips for men, wear matching socks. Don't have white socks with your suit. For women, make sure it's on the conservative side as far as nothing too short or too tight. I think skirt suits or pantsuits are okay as long as it's business appropriate. You see both on the interviews. I didn't see very many dresses. It was mostly either your standard skirt suit or your standard pantsuit. Heels, it's totally okay to wear flats. I think a lot of girls like to really look professional and wear heels. You're doing a lot of walking on those interviews, and you don't want to be the girl that's limping around and clanking around all the hallways. If you really like to have a little bit of height on you, wedges are great because they're comfortable and you can still walk in them. A big tip that I had that seems silly, but it was probably one of the best tips I got for interviews: don't buy new shoes the day before your first interview. Buy them right now. Go out this weekend, get shoes, and break them in a little bit so that you get blisters. You're doing a ton of walking. You're traveling all the time. So have shoes that are broken in so you're not sore. And really, think practical and professional. If you want to wear a bright shirt or something like that, as long as it's business appropriate, just think of the outfit as being something that cannot really help you but can hurt you if it's not appropriate.
Also think about where you're going. It's okay when you come to New England in January to wear boots and ask to change into your shoes when you get there. I've had people come without coats. It's 0 degrees up here, and we'll have a place for you to hang your coat and put your snowshoes. That's what we're all doing. But I have seen people that they want that first impression to be so professional, but I also want you to be practical. It's cold up here in the winter.
I think it shows there is some idea of fit with location too. Most of the time, you don't want to sell, oh, I really want to be in this area and your site happens to be there. You want to be going to a site that fits your training needs, but you want to look like you can exist in a site and make it. And so I came from Florida, and so I think I had to make sure to sell the fact that I could deal with a winter and not be miserable. And so, I mean, you want to be practical. And I think if I had showed up without a coat on, it made me look less inclined to be able to hack it in New Hampshire. It's nice to have governments on you sometimes when they do provide. I interviewed at several New England sites, and they're big on their pizza up here, and so you don't want to be the person with garlic and onion breath in the afternoon. So having mints or gum on hand can make you feel more confident when you're talking to people. The most important thing as far as what you bring to an interview, though, is definitely the appropriate attitude and just general social skills. Be nice to everybody, not just the people who you think are especially important. Demonstrate interest to everybody. The receptionists and the administrative personnel work really hard, and they're really busy having to manage scheduling for all of the applicants, and a lot of that falls on them. So it's completely appropriate to express gratitude, be personable. If you're rude to the person who's showing you where the office is or who meets you in the morning, they all talk, they work together. They're going to find out. Up. So, and fellow interns, postdocs, everyone talks. And so you want to be comfortable with people. It's completely okay to ask current interns and postdocs questions about the sites that maybe you wouldn't feel as comfortable asking a training director, but everyone talks. So no complaining, I heard, I guess as far as stories you hear, sometimes interns will be told by applicants that it's not their favorite site, or they'll feel more comfortable and say, well, I really want this other site and this one's kind of a backup. Not appropriate ever. Treat everyone like they have a say in whether you're going to match there or not, whether they do, because it's definitely not a time to completely let your guard down. No complaining about any supervisors, anyone you've worked with. It is a very small field. Everyone knows everyone, and even if they don't know somebody, it never looks good on you to say anything negative about a supervisor, because then that internship training director is thinking, well, what are they going to say about me, if I take them as a student? So say something positive or say nothing at all as far as talking about people who you've worked with or people who you've interacted with. It's appropriate to demonstrate, it's okay to demonstrate appropriate humor, like be a person who you're interviewing with. Some places will have a much more formal vibe than others. So if people are being more casual, it's okay for you to kind of match the, I guess, tone of where you're interviewing, but just make sure that you're, no curse words, keep some level of guard up. And make sure when you're one thing that I would notice when I was interviewing is sometimes they'd kind of huddle you in a room together and you'd be hanging out with other applicants waiting for your time to interview, and people would start complaining about other sites or maybe their language they'd not be as aware of. There's still usually other interns or people in the room, so just be mindful and kind of be aware of yourself at all times while you're there. And it's not the time to complain if you're on the premises anywhere. Everyone's tired, everyone's stressed out, everyone's traveling, and so you want to do your best to look energetic, look excited to be there, and keep it to yourself if you're feeling miserable, because kind of it's part of the deal. It's a tiring process, and everyone knows that, and you just want to appear as positive as possible. I think those are the main things. I think, Dr. Block, it looks like your background is a little bit different. Did you want to chime in with anything, if there's anything that I left out that you wanted to add, or if you want to jump right into the CV formatting guidelines?
Well, hopefully you all hear me. I apologize. I must be having connectivity issues. Can you hear me okay?
No.
It's still kind of...
Okay. Yeah. I might have to bow out of the call, though, if I don't have good connectivity.
That's better.
That's
what
actually
you just did
better.
Was okay.
What?
Yeah, I think you're actually better now.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's actually better.
Okay. So you hit all probably the most important point. I was listening to people talk. I think the important key with these is to relax and enjoy the process, and I think Katie touched on that earlier. I think the nice thing about the internship process is it's a good chance to stop and take a look at everything all together. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
why don't we, if viewers are having a lot of trouble hearing Dr. Block, go ahead and post in the question section. We're going to assume that you can hear her unless we get some comments in the question section that you can't. So if you wouldn't mind posting either way, just whether you're having trouble or not, because those are coming up. So in the meantime, we'll let Dr. Block go ahead with some CV, and I'll just monitor the questions here to see if we're having reception issues.
Katie, I wonder if you can pipe me in by phone instead.
I think I've got one comment that you're seen and heard fine. So for the time being, I think it's probably going okay.
Which comment is that?
There's a comment in the question and answer. It's just that they can see and hear you fine. So I think for right now, the reception's good. So I'll let you know. I'll cut you off if people are having issues. But for the time being, I think we're doing okay.
Okay, because I'm going by your faces. So, okay. They said as long as I speak slowly, I can hear her fine. Okay, that's good. So I'll just slow down a little bit. So I think the process of internship applications is a really nice one because I think as a graduate student, you have nose to the grind kind of on a day-to-day, and it's really hard to stop and think about sort of the big picture. And when you sit down and you work days and your CV, it's a really nice opportunity to take a look back, accomplishments that you've made.
Dr. Block, I'm cutting you off really quick. Try to turn your webcam off so we just have you on audio. I think that'll help.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm on audio now.
Much better.
Okay. Okay. So as a graduate student, you have your nose to the grindstone on a day-to-day, and it's really hard to stop and take a look at everything all together and sort of your journey from year one all the way to internship. And really, there's a lot that happens in those grad students, pretty short, but a lot happens. And I think being able to work on those essays in the CV really gives you an opportunity to stop for a moment and think about your journey and how do your interests mesh and your experiences come together to produce you as a candidate. And so I think trying to enjoy that process rather than seeing it as a cumbersome one and reframing it that way is especially helpful. And I agree with Katie. I also found the internship interviews to be a really enjoyable process. I think it, you know, in the same way that you might enjoy going to a conference and getting to interface with colleagues and meet other people and hear about their research, I think it's a really rewarding process. You make a lot of new friends. You get to make a lot of new professional connections. I think a lot of the tips you gave for the essays and the personal statements are very good ones. For the letters of recommendation, one thing that I would recommend is to do due diligence in preparing a good packet of information for your letter writers. So maybe including a most up-to-date of your essays, but also putting together like a list of that you have. Now let's say that you have this professor to write your letter. You might provide with a bulleted list of, well, I took this to bring up this with you, it's a theme. And then their dissertation can really jogging their memory so that they can write a really nice, fleshed out letter for you. And that really takes the burden off your letter.
Hey, Dr. Block. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off. I think we're having too many reception issues.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, we can host another talk at some point with Dr. Block to get her feedback, but I think for the time being, we're just having some issues hearing her. So we'll go ahead, and now's the time if you haven't already posted questions. We have Dr. Flashman here who's ready to answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to go ahead and start to give you all a chance to start posting any questions. We have a few that have popped up already, but please feel free. If you came in a little late, you should have a Q&A icon somewhere on your screen. You can click on that and it'll show, the question bubbles will pop up, and feel free to post any kind of questions that you have that you'd like Dr. Flashman to respond to during the talk. I'm going to go ahead and start with a few questions that we had in advance that people had emailed me. So the first one that I think is, I've heard this before from other people, so I think it's a rather common one if you want to stay in a same geographic area. Would internship committee consider it redundant to take someone for an internship that they've already had for a practicum? So is it potentially a weakness to be applying to an internship somewhere where you've already trained?
So my guess is that varies across the sites and based on the level of the practicum student. For me, a good practicum student will make a good intern. So I already know what they can do, what their experiences are. They already know my system, so they come in and can hit the ground running. We often then will keep our interns as postdocs. So for me, it's not a disadvantage at all. And in fact, unless you're not a strong candidate, in which case I've already seen what you can do. But I think if you go in and you're doing a good job there and people like you, I don't really think it's going to be perceived as a disadvantage.
This is another one that I've had come up. I actually mixed a couple questions because I had similar questions come from multiple people. This is one that's popped up on our Facebook page a lot as well. So one person had emailed a question who's coming from a non-accredited APA site, another one from one who's in the process of undergoing accreditation. So I'm I guess presenting the question a little bit more generally. What is your advice for people who are either coming from a non-accredited APA program, or they're in a program that's in the process of applying for accreditation? One person specifically was thinking about waiting a year to apply and get more experiences in hopes that the program might either achieve APA accreditation or be closer through the self-study process.
Right. So to me, in some ways, those are two different questions. So a program that's new and hasn't really had the chance to do it, I think the longer you can wait, the better, because you can at least say that the application is in process. Some internships are going to have rules, and if you're not in an APA program, you're going to get into that cut pile. So at Dartmouth, for example, we get over 400 applications for all of our internships, not just for the neuropsychology one. And there are people that are going to be discarded right out of hand because they don't meet the criteria. So unfortunately, to be here, you have to be an American citizen, you have to come from an APA accredited program. So for people who are not in APA accredited programs, I think it's important to sort of look through the literature and get a sense of whether the internship programs are going to consider your applications. I don't know what you can say to someone who says we're not going to take anyone not from an APA approved program if you're not in an APA approved program that's going to make them consider you in a different light. If it is a program that takes students from non-APA programs, then the burden is on you to put forth your best foot and show what a strong candidate you are in the context of other people who may have chosen that internship to apply to for the very same reasons that you are. I don't know if that's helpful, but
yeah. In a related question, we received one from someone asking, most of the sites have guidelines for how many hours you need to have as far as minimums. And there's two questions that I'm, again, mixing into one. One is, if you're close to the cutoff but not quite there, is it okay to apply? Is it okay to email the site and ask, I'm close to but not quite at your minimum hours? How do you approach that if you feel like you're a good fit in every other way?
So I think it's always okay to email a site and ask questions. So again, at Dartmouth, I'm not the first one that does the first pass. So there's 400 internship applications come in, somebody else reviews them and gives me a top candidate set of lists. So I may not see how many hours or how close you are to the hour thing, because you might not have made the cut. But if you contact the people and let them know that you're thinking about applying, then sometimes I'll write a note that says, at least let me see this application. So again, some places, when you have 400 applications, you can be a little bit choosy. And so if a guideline is a guideline, they may tell you that if this is really the place you want to go, that you might want to consider waiting a year. And, sometimes that's not so bad. It's really, so much easier if you come to internship with your dissertation already done, right? So a lot of people don't do that. So that's not a wasted year. If you already have your dissertation done, it's a year to get some more clinical experiences that might make you more competitive. It's a chance to write up some papers. I think one of the questions that somebody had asked was, how do we think about posters and publications?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that much about posters. I mean, I think it's nice, but I definitely weight more people who have managed to get out a publication. It does not need to be a first author publication, but those are the kinds of people that show me that they're well-rounded and that they're interested in the sort of triple threat kind of model. They want to be they want to be practitioners, they want to be researchers, and they've shown that by, making the effort to try to get a publication out. I think that can only help. Do we ever look at people that don't have any publications? Sure we do. But it certainly stands out to me when people have, and 1 is a fine number. You don't have to have 12, you don't have to have 40. And again, you don't have to be the first author, but it's nice to have shown that you've done something that's more than just poster worthy. I mean, posters are nice, but that doesn't really weight much for me. I'm not ranking that as I'm selecting my top candidates.
I'm going to go ahead. We have some questions popping in, so I'm going to go through and start with those. Dr. Flashman, can you please elaborate on the comment you made earlier that you value neuropsychology experience in Essay 1 more than other components of the application? In your experience, does this apply to most neuropsych internships?
I don't have any idea what other people do. And again, you might, when you're asking your questions or looking at the material, see how things go. So here, they come through a screen and I get a pile of, 30 or 40. We interview 12. And I pick those 12, and then they go out to all the other people that are interviewing them. So there are people who are weighing the therapy essays, but I've already picked based on neuropsychology. But that's how this one is set up. This is the people that come and want to be on the neuropsychology track at New Hampshire Hospital and here at Dartmouth want to be neuropsychologists and do neuropsychology postdocs, and so I get to pick first because this is the trajectory that their careers are going. I mean, some people pick neuropsych as one of their tracks on an internship program, but they haven't decided whether they're going to be neuropsychologist or health psychologist, or they think both of them are interesting. But the people that come to Dartmouth want to be neuropsychologists when they grow up. And so because of that, that's how I weight the applications when I'm reviewing them. I honestly don't know what other people do.
And I think just in talking with other training directors at conferences and other settings, as well as actually in interviews, I've heard a range. I've gotten impressions during some of my interviews that people have definitely read all of my materials in detail. Some will flat out tell you, you'll show up, you'll fly across the country to a site, and they'll say, I haven't really seen your application material, tell me about yourself. And so it varies. I've heard some people say they don't care about the essays at all, other than they screen them to find out if you can write with good grammar and whether you have a diagnosis that seems to be coming through. Like, it's kind of a personality assessment in a way. So it varies so much across sites that I don't think you can have a rule of thumb. You really have to treat every piece of application material like they're going to read it and it's going to be important to them, because you never really know, I think, what sites will emphasize over other parts of the application. I'm going to go ahead with the next question. What consideration is given to practicum training availability? If you're interested in working with adults, but a pediatric site was the best neuropsych experience available near your school, how do you explain the discrepancy?
I think you just did explain the discrepancy. The problem from my perspective is, what I'm hoping to do with somebody during their internship is teach them how to take the neuropsych data that hopefully they've been giving through testing through their practicum and learn how to integrate that and become good and concise writers. So I don't need my intern applicants to have done a lot of report writing, but I need them to have done a lot of testing. And again, I have the luxury of having people apply who've done a lot of testing. So I have had people come where the weight is more toward pediatric than toward adult, but they're hoping to develop their adult skills. I mean, I will tell them when they come here, I see you've done a lot of pediatrics. We don't really offer too much in terms of our internship in terms of pediatrics. So I hope that you're thinking that you want to work with adults because that's what we have here. And if they say that and I believe them, then I will consider it. But if you haven't given a lot of adult tests, you're not going to pass my threshold for coming for interview.
I think that also highlights looking at the resources available, because I think that's a good example. In the ANST training director meeting that you did that's on the ANST website, you talk about that, how that's an important thing you look at is testing hours. And so as much as you can learn about the sites and the training directors, what they emphasize more than others, I think it gives you a little bit of an edge of being able to present yourself in the best light possible. You mentioned research experience. What if you're applying from a PsyD program, and how much does this weigh on the acceptance for interview versus, okay. So basically the question is, I think there's a stigma or generalization in the field that PsyDs don't always have as much research competence or productivity as PhD students. So how much is the degree program you're coming from going to weigh into how your application is considered?
It doesn't weigh into mine at all. In fact, even for my postdocs, until the day that they come and I have to fill out their application, I don't know who's a PhD and who's a PsyD. I just don't pay that much attention to it. I'm looking for the productivity. So if you're and I don't care for your dissertation whether you've done actual data collection or you've worked from an archival data set. That doesn't matter to me. It may matter to other people. But what I'm looking for is that you're able to go through the process and get it done and conceptualize a thought. And whether you've actually gathered the data or not gathered the data yourself doesn't really matter that much to me. Again, I'm going to look at your CV, and if you have a publication, that weighs a little bit more with me. If you've, shown experience in doing research, that helps. But it's a clinical internship, and I get that. And when people come and their dissertations are not finished, we won't even let them play in our research pool. But I do have people that stay for postdocs. So again, they can be looking around and knowing the kind of things that I have to offer. And I want people to have an interest so that they're going to, if they stay for their postdoctoral fellowship, they will get involved in the research kinds of opportunities that we have. But I don't look at, your degree doesn't matter to me.
I'll pipe in if to that point. I was a PsyD applicant, and I applied to a lot of programs that did have more of a research emphasis or seemed to value students coming from more of a research background. I think that my CV looked maybe more researchy than a lot of PsyD students, and so I was applying to sites that I felt like were good fit for me and my training versus the degree program that I came from. And so I think it's important, get feedback if you're not sure, but it's not so much the degree program that you come from as the experiences that you've had. If you've come from a PsyD program that is more clinically oriented and less research focused, and therefore you don't have as much research training, you're probably not going to be as competitive to sites that really value that. That being said, it is a clinical year, so it seemed like more often than not, sites were really emphasizing your clinical training more than your research training, and the research comes in, I think, more for postdoc. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. So I see a slew of questions that are coming in about hours and how many batteries. So again, I'm not very good at addressing what other people want. I don't have a magic number. I want, more than 10. I want to feel like I don't want to teach people how to do testing here. I have the luxury of not having to do that. So if you can't get neuropsych experience before you apply for internship, this internship is not going to be a very good match. There are neuropsychology tracked programs where the role of neuropsychology is to teach people how to do neuropsychology testing. But what I really want is a chance to have had people that have had a lot of opportunities to give different tests, but maybe not write so many reports, to learn how to take the data and put it into a, communicative, integrative product that they can then share with doctors and patients and their families so that people can understand what to do with that data. But I'm not speaking for every neuropsych internship that there is. So in terms of hours, I would say that most people that apply to Dartmouth have more than 500 or 600 hours in the assessment category, and have done, and again, I don't expect you to do every test that I do. We do some weird tests here, and there are tests that you've probably given a lot that we don't use here. People can read directions and learn how to give tests, but I want to see that you've done the CBLT. I want to see that you've done the Wechsler memory scale. I want to see that you've done the WACE and the WASI. I want to see, DCAF's experience. And, if you haven't done the Gordon CPT, which is the CPT we use, then I will teach you how to do the Gordon CPT. I don't expect you to know every test in our arsenal, but I expect you to have a pretty broad base of testing. And we have people who have maybe worked as practicum, have worked as psychometrists before they've gone to graduate school or been working while they're going. So, people apply that have done over 100 WACEs. You don't have to do that many, but again, 2, this is probably not the best fit for you.
I found that to be the case across the board when I was interviewing. There are sites that have generalized tracks or geriatric tracks or other kinds of tracks with a neuro component or that offer some neuro training that I think are more likely to take candidates that have a little bit of neuro training. But I interviewed, I think all the sites that I interviewed at were specific neuro tracks, and they all really expected that you had basic training where you've had at least a couple practicums and you've tested independently and written reports independently, where if it's really something that you want to do is pursue a neuropsych track internship site, I think to be realistic, it might be taking another year if you feel like you don't have very much neuro training at all, because my experience is that there aren't a lot of neurotrack sites that are going to take you as that being your initial exposure to neuropsych. You really have to have enough that you can demonstrate that you have the foundation, I think.
I think that's fair.
Format. Oh, Dr. Flashman.
I don't know what the
Do you know what that is?
No, I do not.
Well, that'll be fun for you. There's a new letter of rec format that's very involved. We're going to skip on the question about the formatted letter recommendation because I don't think that Dr. Flashman's had the pleasure of seeing that yet. In application materials like essays, how important is it to highlight yourself as having special interest in neuropsychology versus talking about the variety of experiences to present yourself as a well-rounded clinical psychologist? That is such a question that comes up every time that's so hard, I think, to find that balance. So
again, I can only speak for me. I want you to weigh in on your neuropsychology side, right? You will have to do clinical rotations. We do inpatient psychology here, and you're going to have to get by those supervisors. So the more experience you have in that, the more to hype in that letter. And once you get invited here, but you're going to get invited here on the basis of your neuropsych experience.
I think a related question, I'm going to go right into this one. Do you recommend, I'm going to just interject really quick. We have 1 minute left. Dr. Flashman's agreed to stay a little late to answer a couple lingering questions. And so if you want to stay around, I don't think we're going to end quite on time. At some point, we'll probably have to let her go home. And sorry, I'm trying to find the questions. The question was, do you recommend to have 3 neuropsychologists write letters of recommendation or 2 neuropsychologists and 1 clinical psychologist? Is there a happy balance that you can recommend as far as letters of recommendation go, or how do you select your letter writers?
I think the 2 neuropsychologists, 1 clinical psychologist is probably the best, even for me, because other people are looking at your application, and this way they're able to sort of speak to more than just the neuropsychology experience that you've had. There's also a blurb in the application, at least there has been in the past, where the director of the program that says you're ready to go has a chance to put information in about both your neuropsych and your non-neuropsych experience. I would encourage you to have that person do so, because that's sort of like getting a free extra letter. But what I'm looking for in letters, and I don't know if this new format is going to prohibit it or not. I mean, if you're not asking the people if they can write positive letters for you before you have them write them, you should think about doing that. So almost every letter that I get is positive, and then the trick is learning how to sort of read between the lines of, because I very rarely get a letter that says, this person really needs a lot of work and they're really nice, but they really need this internship year before I would feel comfortable. I mean, mostly they're glowing, but some are shiny glowing that you can see from outer space. And that, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the tone of the letter. And again, to me, the talk about the potential, the talk about accomplishments, the talk about sort of the interpersonal style, those things weigh more to me than who actually wrote the letter. So I think the balance is probably the better way to go.
Let's see. Oh, here's something. So someone specifically asked, they took 2 years off after completing coursework to take care of their terminally ill parents. Should they mention that in their cover letter or essay 1, or not mention it at all? Would you mind speaking more generally if there are personal factors that an applicant feels like is in some way affecting who they are professionally?
Yes, I think they should be mentioned. I think they should be mentioned in the essays. I think the cover letter is the selling yourself, And unless there's, I haven't read your CV at that point, I haven't looked through your application, I don't know there are gaps in time or things that need to be explaining. So in that cover letter, I'm looking for, again, the why you're a good match with me, where you see yourself going and how I can help you get there. I see that as the selling. And then in the essays, again, where there is a little bit more of a personal flavor, that's where I might expect to see an explanation of these sort of circumstances that have made the path be not straight. Other people can also address it in their letters of recommendation. So that's another place where it could come up. I've had people write letters that say, you know, you may notice in her CV that there's been a gap of 2 years. You know, during this time she was doing X, Y, and Z, but she also was trying to maintain her interest by doing, you know, something else. And I think that's perfectly appropriate.
That's actually really helpful. I wish I had had that. Can you speak briefly about how you go through an application? Like, what order do you look at? Because I think that's helpful to know what a training director is doing with this material.
So I can tell you what I do. I look at the cover letter. I look at the testing experience. I look at that very first page that talks about your dissertation, what it's about, where you are in the trajectory. And honestly, that I don't ask for, I'm a pretty cream puff interviewer. I'm more telling you about my program than asking you to tell me where you see yourself in 5 years or to conceptualize a case. But I will ask you if you're on that trajectory that you've laid out. So if you said that you expected by the time you saw it by January to have, you know, your data collected, I'm going to ask you where you're standing on that. So don't over project, because that just is one of those things that kind of looks like I did this to look really good, but you know, so I look at the testing experience. I look at that page that sort of summarizes whether you have publications, where you are in your dissertation project. I look at that actual test list where you tell me how many times you've given X, Y, and Z. And then I read the first essay, the neuropsych essay. I mean, I read all the essays, but I read with more care. Those first two, I look at research because I'm interested in research. And again, I'm always thinking, oh, this intern might be a good postdoc. And so while I don't necessarily expect you to come in with research guns blazing, this is a clinical year, I like to know if I think down the road that that might be something. And then I read the letters of recommendation. And then I read your CV. That's the last thing I look at.
I think that's helpful. I've always wondered that. It's nice to get the other side with how they're viewing the application.
I think this was the slew of,
I think, numbers for assessment. The Ritchie article is not, I was a very black and white, I like to know details. And so the Ritchie article is nice for everyone who likes to know what's the average number of pubs that someone has? What's the average number of hours? It's nice if you want that data. Following up from another question, are students from generalist programs at a disadvantage when applying to neuropsychology track internships? Is there a minimum? Okay, so this is talking about more experience that I think you've already addressed, but do you look at generalist versus track programs?
I look at the experience that you, so if you're in a generalist program, but you've been able to
and you talked a little bit about research, but someone's asking importance of the overlap of research with neuropsychology, and this question's come up a lot during our convention talks. If your research is not directly related to neuropsychology, but is either in behavior medicine or health medicine, or you have kind of but not directly neuropsychology, how does that affect your application? Do you care? It
doesn't affect my application. It does affect. So, I mean, I wouldn't ever not interview someone if everything else was great because they didn't do it, because people's minds change along the road. Again, everyone's path isn't, I come into graduate school wanting to be a neuropsychologist, I only like the neuropsychology classes. And so some people start and they get involved, or, you know, a dissertation is a step in the process of getting your degree. And sometimes we just want to get that done so that we can move on. And so if there are not opportunities to do neuropsych-focused dissertations, I get that. Mm-hmm. But what I would like to hear is that now that you've decided that neuropsychology is the thing that you're committing to, what you hope to study in terms of research down the road is related to neuropsychology and is something. It's attention, it's cognitive deficits in schizophrenia. I mean, it doesn't have to be like I want to study D2 receptors and how that is impacted by, you know, clozaril in patients who've had schizophrenia for more than 5 years. I don't need a really specific, but I want to know that, yes, you did your dissertation and it had nothing to do with neuropsychology or little to do with neuropsychology, but now that you've decided you want to be a neuropsychologist, your research interests are also turning in that direction?
We have a couple more. We'll maybe take a couple more questions. And then, there's one that was emailed ahead that a couple people emailed that I want to make sure gets addressed. For those interested in becoming a neuropsychologist and who have board certification on the mind as a long-term goal, when they're looking at maybe backup sites, or I guess safety sites is a term that comes up a lot, APA accredited sites that aren't neuropsychology internship sites. So Dr. Flashman can I say that she's also the secretary on the board of directors of the American Board of, is that okay to say now that I've said it? But so she does have some expertise on just the path to board certification, at least with American Board of Clinical Neuropsychology, which is the AACN board. ABCN is the board. So for those with board certification on the mind, and just postdoc on the mind, can you talk about the advantage, disadvantage of an APA accredited internship site that is not a neuropsych track, and or an APIC internship that is not APA accredited but maybe has some neuropsych training?
So Katie gave me this question ahead so I could think about my answer. And really the answer is, if this is what you want to do, it is worth taking the extra time to wait a year to be competitive. If you go to an APA-approved non-neuropsych internship, you will not be able to get a neuropsych postdoc very easily because you have not built on that capacity. And again, just like when I look for interns, I want people that know how to do neuropsych testing but not necessarily know how to write. When I look for postdocs, I'm looking for people that have had a lot of that writing experience, so that what we can do in the postdoc is hone those skills, make them do it faster, make them do it tighter, make them do it better. But if they haven't done it on their internship, they're again not going to be competitive from a postdoctoral point of view. I don't know enough about APIC neuropsych programs to say that that's a bad choice to make. But again, there are some places that are going to require completion of an APA internship to be able to do a postdoctoral fellowship. So have all the safety nets you want, but just remember that I know it seems like it's taking forever, but 1 year invested now to get stronger and more competitive is going to save you a whole lot of headache later down the road if your real goal is board certification.
I wanted to add two quick things that popped up for me on that, because we'll get a lot of questions through ANST about APA versus not APA internships as it applies to board certification. And on the ABCN website, it says, I think the exact verbiage is an APA accredited or consistent. It says something like you don't have to have an APA accredited internship as long as it's consistent with, but it's just important to keep in mind that you also are required to have that postdoctoral experience. So even if the ABCN website says that, it also says that you need to have a postdoc, so make sure that you're meeting the postdoc requirement. So look at the postdocs that you're interested in applying to and make sure that you're meeting those criteria as well, because that is a step to meet those board certification requirements.
Absolutely.
And then also, just because we do get a lot of questions through ANST about competitiveness and kind of safety sites versus competitive sites, it is important to think of fit. Personally, when I applied to several sites that I thought there's no way they're ever going to look at me. They're so competitive, or there's this big name, and I got an interview because I was a good fit, even if they had what I perceived as a more competitive program. And one of the sites that I applied to because I thought they were a safety site, and I thought, well, if no one else interviews me, they're going to interview me, and they declined an interview for me. And so I think it's not just how many numbers of people they have and dividing, it's really looking at the individual site and are you a good fit, because a safety site, there's really no such thing. I think there's a lot of competitive people and there's a lot of sites, and so they're looking for people that match specifically with the training program. There's one more question we have, and then I think we'll probably wrap it up. What information is helpful to provide letter writers? So I think maybe drawing from your experience as a letter writer as well as a receiver.
So it's really helpful for me to have a CV so that I can talk about the practicum experiences that somebody's had, what their dissertation is about, whether they've had publications or not, and also anything that you want to give me about the particular site and why you think you're a good fit for that. So it's really helpful for me to be able to say, you know, they have a very strong interest in geriatrics, and that's why your Alzheimer's center is really, you know, would be a very nice place for them, and those sorts of things. So you should feel free to help direct the letter writer a little bit by suggesting certain things that you would like to be included. I think they mostly appreciate that and don't find it, you know, overbearing or presumptuous. You know, it's hard to write those letters sometimes, so it's really helpful to know what it is that you want us to say or what it is about your experiences that you'd like us to highlight.
I did that, and I approach it with a little bit of humor of, I think I have a personality that can be perceived as somewhat neurotic sometimes, and I will own that. But I printed off, I think, the ANST directors meeting that you did, and I gave it to my letter writers. Like, this is a site I'm applying to that I want to look competitive at. Like, I gave them a lot of information about the sites I was really interested in, and most of my letter, I mean, I don't know if they read it or not, but they seem to appreciate it. It seems like more information is better than not enough, because if you give them the info, they can choose to use it or not. But if they don't have it, I think that's what seems to be more of a challenge, is writing a letter just based on memory. Because I asked for letters from people who knew me really well, and I think still that doesn't mean they remembered.
Exactly.
I don't remember.
You know your
details,
details,
CV,
right? Exactly.
So, I think that's, yeah. Before we wrap up, Dr. Block sends her regrets. She was really looking forward to this, so she felt bad that she wasn't able to stay because of the computer issues, the technical issues we were having. So she sends her regrets. Is there anything that you don't think was covered before we wrap up that just as is important advice, or something that you would like to share that you think is important as people approach their application?
No, I don't think that. I think I would highlight that not only should you proofread it, but maybe give somebody else that doesn't know what it should say it to proofread, because I know when I proofread my own work, I see what I think should be there and not necessarily what is there. And it really does, it does leave a bad taste when something is spelled wrong in your CV or in your cover letter. So it's worth taking the extra time to sort of have somebody critique that, and to have them sort of get a feel for whether you do want to put yourself forward without sort of sounding too like I've done it all. But it's, you know, it's helpful for people to know what experiences you've had and what experiences you're hoping to get. So, you know, having somebody sort of feel what that tone is like, sometimes it's a little hard for you to judge it for yourself.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you guys so much for participating. We'll have this up on YouTube for those who want to refer back to it again, if it was just so fun that you want to watch it all over again. But and for anyone who couldn't make it, it'll be up as well. So if you want to share with peers or other classmates, it'll be available then. But thank you so much for participating, and good luck. It's fun, and it'll be over soon. So thank you guys.
Good night.